As one of American's leading composers, Ellen Tafe-Svillick is the recipient of numerous prizes and honors, including the 1983 Pulitzer Prize in Music for her work Three Movements for Orchestra. She was elected to the Florida Artists Hall of Fame and the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and in 1995 was named the first composer's chair in the history of Carnegie Hall. A prolific composer in virtually all musical media, Miss Svillick has produced 5 symphonies and other orchestral essays, numerous concertos for a wide variety of solo instruments, and a sizable canon of chamber music and recital pieces. Her works are played regularly by the leading orchestras and ensembles throughout the world. The Library of Congress is pleased to be able to open our virtual season with one of her works, Romans, for violin and piano. Welcome, Miss Svillick.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Yes. The Library of Congress commissioned your Romans for violin and piano in 1993. And when you look over the oeuvre of your work from your first commissions in the early 70s until today, I'm curious, how has the way in which the role of commissioning music has changed over the decades? Or to put it another way, what changes have you seen in how institutions think about commissioning and its place in their seasons?
I would say things have really gotten better, actually. And I've been very lucky to kind of be in the right place at the right time and throughout my musical life. And so it's been a pretty good time for composers. Not a great time, but a good time, a decent time. And there's much more interest in new music. Um, the My piece that she's going to play was commissioned by the McKim Fund in the Library of Congress, and it was first performed by Annie Kavafian and Menahem Pressler. And Annie and I were talking afterwards and saying, this would work very well for violin, a little chamber orchestra, maybe just strings or something. I said, yeah, I agree. So I did it. As a matter of fact, during this season, the Santa Rosa Symphony played my piece for chamber orchestra and solo violin. Um, if you want a little bit about the piece, this was um, I think I was about to write my violin concerto. I was thinking all about it when I wrote this. And my violin concerto is a little bit on the complicated side with a lot of references and things like that. And um, I just wanted to do a kind of a smaller fiddle piece. I love the violin. I was a violinist. I was the only instrument I ever played professionally, and I'm still in love with the instrument. And I spent 7 years in the American Symphony under Leopold
Oh,
Stokowski.
yes, I also read that you studied with Galamian when you were at Juilliard with Ivan Galamian.
Yes, I
Yeah.
didn't study with him at Juilliard, but I did study with him in New York. Yes. And earlier with Richard Bergen, who was a wonderful musician. He'd been concertmaster of the Boston Symphony for many years, and he was, you know, a wonderful musician. Um, so I was lucky to be in these places. And what I was going to say is that the this is a piece about the violin singing, and a little bit of dancing, but it's a little more romantic view of the instrument. That's why I called it romance. Um, my violin concerto, which was almost at the same time, I think a little bit later, um, there's a reference to the Bach Chaconne. There's things like that.
You attended Florida State University in Tallahassee, where you are now professor, and I read in like a New York Times article that you had mentioned that you played in an orchestra for conducting classes given by the late Ernst von Dohnányi, who was a highly respected Hungarian pianist and composer, and he was essentially a 19th century European artist, very old world, I would say, and so yeah, like, even though you would have been quite young when you worked with him, were there things from your interactions with him that you particularly remember? And I ask that in like the sense just because you would be one of the few people sort of on earth that sort of still have a connection to someone that lived during the time of, you know, um, Brahms and Stravinsky and Schoenberg.
Well, Dohnányi was very famous and all of that sort of things, a wonderful performer, uh, excellent conductor, and of course a fabulous pianist. And he was a wonderful composer. He was sort of out of style at that point, but he was the sweetest guy in the world. He was like a grandfather to me, and he sort of took me under his wing, and he let me. Maybe I was, 17 or 18, and let me talk, and I remember once, this is something I'll never forget. I was playing a Brahms violin piano sonata, and I said, I really like the third sonata best. I think it has much more content and so on and so forth. And he sat there listening to this kid talk. The three sonatas are so different. I would feel that I was wrong if I picked a favorite. And I thought, wow, that was a very I just got goosebumps thinking about it. That was an interesting thing, take each piece as it is, and don't sit there like a quasi musicologist and grade people. Things like that would happen with him. And I had a couple of letters from him that I threw away because I'd read them. I mean, I was just totally innocent. Uh, but he was very, very kind to me. And meanwhile, I was playing jazz trumpet at the very same time. And it was this, neither of these things were in the curriculum, which is interesting. But all day Sunday, there was a jam session, and I played bebop trumpet and big band and, stuff like that. And the thing that was so critical to me is that I didn't see any issue with that. There were people in the classical field that thought, that, what are you doing playing jazz? And there were people in the jazz area that would say, why are you, playing in a Bartok string quartet? I wanted it all, and I still do. And I think that's a wonderful thing about really, essentially, we're talking 21st century American music. I think is much more open, and it's all there. Whatever whatever affects us is there to be a part of us.
Great. Well, so we're now joined by the violin soloist of the Romans in the concert that we're performing. Like Ty Murray has joined us. So I'm very glad to have Ty Murray, who's professor of violin at Yale University.
Hi.
Do you have any insights or questions about how it was like to play her piece? Or again, you both went to Juilliard. And you're both violinists. Is there anything that you would like to maybe share with Ms. Filek, or is there, are there any questions you might have?
Yes, well, actually, I had a question that just came up just listening to what you were just saying. Did you ever work with David Baker at Indiana?
No, I never.
No, okay, yes, because you said bebop, and I took his jazz history class many times, and
I was back in the day of Clifford Brown was like my guy.
He talked about Clifford Brown quite a lot. But it was such a pleasure to play your romance. It was a pleasure to step in and learn it for this. I was wondering what your inspiration was for writing it.
Well, just love of the violin, and to me, it's a part of my body in a way. Like when I'm writing for the violin, I will have the violin under my chin. Now, you would not want to hear me today. Believe me, I'm out of shape totally, but just the feeling of the instrument is a part of me. And I love it. And I just keep writing for the violin, and sometimes solo violin, and sometimes ensemble. And I love strings in general. Actually, I love instruments. And to me, they're like creatures. They have their own way of moving, and certain things they like to do and certain things they don't. And it's a lifetime joy for me to write for instruments.
One other question that I had for you is, you've worked with so many different orchestras yeah, pretty much every major orchestra in the United States. And I'm curious, from your perspective, um, yeah, having played in orchestra yourself, and having worked with so many different orchestras, and also with this idea of commissioning, what do you personally think is the future of the symphony orchestra? Yeah, um,
Ah, well, that's a long, there's a
yeah, I
long
know it's a
answer to
long,
that.
yeah, I know it's a very broad question, but yeah, yeah,
Well,
as someone that has had such a wide diverse of musical interests and experiences, and as you see where the field is going, yeah, like what is your current
I'll
impression?
tell you what I've been thinking during the pandemic. Um, Partly because so many major institutions just kind of shut down, or they started doing silly little things like driving around town and dumping people on a corner and having them play something, you know. But the smaller orchestras stepped up to the plate. And one of the things that I noticed, I had this kind of relationship with the Santa Rosa Symphony throughout the season of the pandemic. And I noticed that the sound and the video got better every concert. And so here they are, they're on a stage, smaller forces than normal, no audience, but they're doing something that is really quite good. And my theory was going back to the days when I played trumpet in the marching band when I was in college, and I never watched a whole football game. I couldn't have told you who had the ball or anything like that. Um, but today, there's so much marvelous recording of things like football games, where you've got a producer who knows who's going to have the ball and where to follow it. And you have all kinds of cameras everywhere, and you have a production where a person can be sitting on their couch 2,000 miles away and see the game better than somebody sitting in the stands. And I have a feeling that that's where we're going in a way, that we're going to have such good reproduction of a concert that my one of my theories is you buy a ticket to a concert and then you get a doggy bag, like you might at a restaurant, and your doggy bag is a link to a rebroadcast of the program you just heard. Now that's wonderful because that means like maybe you heard a piece and you didn't quite get it and you'd like to hear it again. Maybe you heard a piece and you loved it, you want to hear it again. Um, and that you have that opportunity. Plus, the camera does things like look at the conductor the way the orchestra looks at the conductor. If you got a good producer, it looks at the person playing a solo, and so on. So it's an enhancement of the actual situation. I don't think anything's going to replace the whole marvelous experience of being in a concert hall where the air is vibrating and what the performers are doing. But it can get enhanced in um, this digital way. And I think that's where we're going to be going, and I think it's a good thing. I was around when they said, oh, all these recordings of concert music, that's going to be the end of live performance. No, it was the beginning of a whole new phase where somebody from a small town in a small state or something could hear some of the best performers in the world, and it inspired people. So, I mean, I think we're in an interesting place.
Yeah, I've been kind of doing a deep dive on many of your works, and yeah, and I'm curious. Yeah, you have not. Well, let's say you've written songs and song cycles for voice and orchestra. I'm curious. Have you ever been interested to write opera, or have you ever been approached about doing an opera? Is that something that you would ever consider still?
I'll tell you the story. I had um, I had a nice offer to write an opera, and I was thinking about it. And I went to Pittsburgh for a performance of my first symphony, and I heard that several different times, and I knew how good the orchestra was, so I didn't have too many butterflies in my stomach. I always have butterflies in my stomach for the performance, but I was a little more relaxed than usual. And I'm sitting there listening to this performance of my first symphony. And I got to the end of it and I said, I have died and gone to heaven. This is where I want to be. And so I went back to New York and I called the people about the opera and I said, no, thank you. And, you know, I used to play stage band at the Met and I know how much is involved.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. And Toi Toi Toi, to my performer there.
Violinist Ty Murray has been described by the Philadelphia Inquirer as a violinist with more than technique on her mind. A winner of the 2004 Avery Fisher Career Grant, Murray has appeared in recital and with major ensembles around the world, including the Atlanta Symphony, Baltimore Symphony, BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra, Chicago Symphony Orchestra, Los Angeles, and the Los Angeles Philharmonic. She has been a BBC Radio 3 New Generation artist and has been a member of Chamber Music Society 2 at Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts. In addition to touring with musicians from Marlborough, Murray has performed at the BBC Proms and Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center and countless other chamber music festivals in both Europe and in the United States. She has several recordings, and in addition to her work playing chamber music and as a soloist and as a concertmaster with orchestras, Miss Ty Murray has also recently become an assistant professor of violin at the Yale School of Music, where she teaches applied violin and coaches chamber music. So Ty, it's such a pleasure to have you here with us today. Welcome. So I need to tell our listeners a very amazing story. So, you know, in regards to putting this concert together, which had many different people and many moving parts, and yeah, you know, it was originally supposed to happen in Coolidge Auditorium in February of 2020, in February 2020, and of course it got canceled due to the pandemic, and so we had to reconvene and everything, and then literally maybe I think it was 2 weeks before we were going to record this program at the Morgan Library Museum, who were gracious collaborators and have helped us to produce this concert. About 2 weeks to 10 days before the concert, the violinist who was originally scheduled, unfortunately, due to an illness in her family, had to cancel. And for any producer of concerts, you know, that's like the call you don't want to get. And so I was thinking, who in the world could I call? And the first person that came to mind was Ty Murray. And I was like, okay, well, let me try Ty. Knowing that at that time you were still living in Berlin, this concert was recorded in June, and I knew that you were still living in Berlin. And so I was like, well, just give it a shot. Maybe she could come and do it. And so I called Ty. It must have been, I knew it was already kind of late at night. It was already like sort of evening in America. And I sent an email out, and then like Ty must have responded. It must have been like 2 a.m. there or something like this. And like, then we had a short conversation, and then you were willing to come. So to make a long story short, I need to thank you again, like for being willing to learn such a monumental program where you not only had to learn Ellen's piece, but you also had to play the Stravinsky Soldier's Tale, and on top of that, Marcellus' Fiddler's Tale, and to learn such a program in literally 10 days is such a phenomenal testament to your musicianship, your technical prowess, and your bravery, quite frankly, your boldness. And I just wanted to thank you again and let our listeners know that Ty Murray literally learned this program in 10 days. And of course, yeah, look, you had played the Stravinsky before, that's true, but the Stravinsky is not an easy piece, and the Marcellus, of course, is a beast to play for the violinist. I mean, you are the star of the show, and I wanted to get an insight from you about when one gets a phone call like that, can you play, you know, two very large pieces and actually a very complicated short piece like you did for us? What is your process? How do you process that? How do you go say, okay, I've accepted to do this and I'm going to do it? How do you go through the steps of learning the piece, going through the steps, getting it back into your fingers? Can you lead us through that?
Well, it's interesting because um, the original decision to say yes means that before anything starts, I have this 100% commitment, right? And that's, I mean, that in a microcosm is what my approach has been all along to like being a musician and a violinist. I have to have this 100% commitment. So then when you add this pressure onto it that you only have this 10 days or whatever it was, then it becomes up after that decision that yes, I'm going to do this, then it becomes about planning. Then it's about I have this much time to learn this much and this much time to learn this part and this much time, and then it becomes putting all those parts together so that it then also becomes like a musical arc and isn't just an exercise that I've now learned how to do. Um, and as you described the Marcellus, it really is a beast. And there was a moment, I would say maybe about 5 days before we actually all met in person. I said, I'm not really sure I could make it because there were some parts just like I need another week. And then I said, but you know what? But actually, I have 30 years already. That's when I had to say, I actually have the experience. I actually have all these years of having figured certain techniques out and certain problem solving ways and certain um ways to understand harmony and rhythm and intention of a composer. And I just said, you know what, I'm going to rely on that experience. And I did, and it really helped me, and I feel that I made it. And so, and it was quite, and I mean, and then separate from that, um the well, it was 3 days, but I mean, you know, two days or whatever of this recording. I mean, it was one of the most greatest experiences. I mean, for many reasons. I mean, I've done all this work, and so I feel like I'm, you know, ready to do something. But also, I was surrounded by, well, you were there, and I was surrounded by all of these musicians that are equally 100% committed to their craft, and that felt so just so great. And I think as a result, we have um, something that shines very brightly on a musical level. And I cannot wait for the audience to see it.
Yeah, no, I think the audience would be really, really enthralled by the performance. And it was just funny because, yeah, you know, a couple of the people, I believe, like Billy Hunter and Weston Sprott, they've played the Fiddler's Tale 3, 4, or 5 times now over the last 10, 15 years or so. And yeah, you know, when I let them know that, like, you know, that you had learned it in 10 days, they were just amazed because you would have never known. Just, you know, you had really learned and mastered the piece. And yes, and what I loved too was that, yeah, like, you know, like you would get, like, you know, like the first thing that you asked me for was not just the part, but that you wanted to have the full score. And
Yeah.
so, yes, and was just clear from your performance that you knew not only your part but how your part interacted with all the other parts, and so therefore you were able to like lead this mammoth work that is an hour long with just such a plum. And yeah, so like, I just wanted to like pivot like a little bit just because um a lot of these kind of skills that one has to apply when you have to learn a piece very quickly in a short amount of time, and you have to like really rely on all of your musical skill sets, knowledge of harmony, knowledge of technique, knowledge of styles and things like this. Those are all things that I think that I'm sure you have to teach to your students at Yale. And so like I'm like curious, yeah, like um, one, congratulations on this new appointment. I think that's fantastic that we have you now back in the United States. And um, um, oh, yeah, like, what are your goals as a teacher to like impart, and how does one sort of teach those skills so that students can, when they get out into the world, do what you did, so that when they get a call, that's their one chance or something, or like their first opportunity that they can attack it and do something with it.
Right. Well, yes, I mean, I thank you, first of all. But then to answer the question about but would like how do you teach someone else to approach something like this? It's about planning again. It's about what do you start with and what do you hope to end with? Because that's the other thing. I think you have to have a clear goal, right? Otherwise, you're just kind of swimming around and you don't know where you're
Hmm.
going. Um, it's for me, it is a great opportunity, and it's also a great gift for me to be able to take all of these things that I have learned from my teachers and all of the great experiences I've had with great musicians and be able to have the time and have the opportunity to explain to my now students, these aspiring violinists and other musicians, um, um, how you respect the score and then have the intention to interpret that score,
Hmm.
and how you bring yourself to that score, and how you also have to leave part of yourself out of that score. Um, and as you say, yes, that was my first question: where is the full score? Without that, I only have a partial view, right? And that goes for any piece. I mean, I play a lot of concerti as a violinist, of course. We have so many, and oftentimes the focus is like tunnel vision. Like I have this solo part, and that's the only part I need to know. But if you really want to be able to express a piece fully to an audience, you need the cooperation with all the rest of the parts. And so, for me, that's very, very important. I try to impart to my students as well that even if you're playing a solo piece, what is that solo piece in relation to? So there's again, it's about this connection, right? It's about connection, and it's about understanding the connection to your own history and your own experience. And so then after that, it's just practice, man, practice.
How do you get to Carnegie Hall? I'm just kidding. Anyway, no, that's all very true. How are you enjoying your time so far at Yale? You're both teaching students, but you're also coaching chamber music as well, correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's so far been, I mean, I actually don't really quite have a word for it. I mean, it's been, of course, very affirming. We are in person this year. That's number one.
Yeah.
Um, but also, it's uplifting. It's celebratory. It's hard work because it should be, and um, it feels like an organic continuation of a part of my life. It is as it should be happening. I'm involved in an apprentice art. The knowledge that I've been given must be passed to someone else in order for violin playing and musicianship to continue to be a great part of all of our lives.
Very well said. Yeah, you're right that music is definitely an apprentice art, because it's something that, even if you don't necessarily want to teach, a musician is always kind of teaching in some way with one's colleagues or with hopefully like a future generation. So yeah, I think this is such a wonderful thing, just because you have such a great background as a soloist and a chamber musician and being a concert master and all of these things. And yeah, I just think it's great that you're in a position to uh, teach young musicians, and to show them how it's done. And you've demonstrated that in our video in spades. So, Ty, thank you so much for joining us and taking time out
Thank
of
you,
your schedule at
Kazim.
Yale to join us. Thank you so much.